Hello and welcome to the last webinar in our series of webinars to get the most out of your FME. I'm Mike Robbins, a software engineer here at MISO. Okay, so if you want to go back to any of the episodes in this series, you can go through the lounge or through YouTube, watch those videos again and again. And if you have any questions on any of those videos, do comment back here at the lounge so we can answer those questions and help you out how we can. Okay, if you've got any questions on this video, which is all about Q&A and a VAR review, if you have any questions on any of those webinars or a question about how to use FME, a certain transformer, anything like that, do comment below and we'll try and get back to those questions about halfway through this webinar and at the end. If they're simple questions, then I'll try and answer them in this webinar. Otherwise, I'll answer them at the end and give you a much more detailed review in the comments section. Okay? So, the first question is from James, posted in webinar 5, where I gave him a solution to his issue. So the issue was with the HTTP caller in our last webinar, you called out to a web API and passed it some options. But James's problem was he needs to get to a download page that has links that will change daily. So one of the links is to education.gov.uk, where they give education information in a CSV format and it changes every day. So the file is going to be education.gov.uk edubase.csv, but that link's going to change every single day and the name's going to change. So you can't have it as a set reader or a set feature reader. It's going to keep changing. So what we need to do, so the problem, you've got a download page and it's got a unique file name or that it keeps changing every single time that you want to get that file. So we want to automate that process. So instead of you having to go to that web page and click on every one or trying to get the URL to put into your FME workspace, just get FME to scan the page and pull down those files for you. So it's a method called web scraping. We're going to take the raw HTML of that page and scan through it for hyperlinks, essentially. It's similar to a HTTP caller. We're going to use a HTTP caller to get the page itself. Once we've set it up, it's quite easy to configure, to manipulate, and get just the URL for that download link so FME can download it and use it in your workspace. The solution, we're going to get the download page. We're going to keep the tags of that download page that contain hyperlinks. Okay, so they're going to be in href tags, quotes. We're going to convert each tag into its own feature. So because we're going to get that one page, there's going to be one feature. We're going to just isolate the maybe 6 or 7 or more tags, and then we're going to split them out. So one feature will have one tag. Okay, pass that feature into a feature reader. We've got to do some prefix first. So we've just got the URL or any use cases where there might not be a domain name, but I'll show you that. We pass that into a feature reader. And the good thing about FME is that if you give it a URL, it will go out, download that URL to one of its temporary locations, then it'll start parsing it before it starts reading it in properly. Okay, so if you have, for this example, a CSV download link, and you pulled in a CSV reader, you don't need to download that file first and then use it. You can just put in that URL, it will pull that down and read it as if it was already downloaded. Well, in effect, it will download it first, but you don't see that it's stored in FME temp file somewhere and then deleted once FME is finished. Okay, so let's show this workspace. We've got, I'll show you the big workspace first, so all of it. So it's quite a simple workspace. It's only split into two sections. So the first section is just to pass hyperlinks. So we have a creator just to kick off our HTTP caller. So this is set up to a publish parameter, which is our target URL. So we could put in any home page or download page. But I've used the example that James specified, which is education.gov, edubase, and a home HTML page. Okay, so I'll set that as a publish parameter. I'm just going to do a really simple get method, send it to an attribute, and put it to an attribute of response body. Okay, so in that response body, we're just going to get a full HTML page, just the HTML code. Okay, we're going to do a bit of regex, regular expression, to get only A tags that have a href in them. Okay, so this, I'll come back to this transformer a little bit later on, but a new version, a new feature in 2016 is you can go into a regular expression editor. Okay, so you'll be able to put in your regular expression at the top, a test string to see if it works in this section, and there's a quick reference guide. And also say how many matches there will be. Because if there's more than one match, it'll put it all into a list attribute. Okay, so regular expressions are, it's an art, it's a language of its own, where you can sometimes decipher it. We want to get A tags at the start that have an attribute href that begins with, and then another published parameter which is passed in. Okay, so that ext of file is actually an extension that we want to look for. We could just put a wildcard, just have a star, so it will grab every href that is in that page, but then that could just lead to a logo where you click it and it just goes to the home page or it goes somewhere else. So we don't want to get those hyperlinks. We want to get ones that are just CSVs or that are zips. Okay. We've made it a publish parameter so the user can say, I want to get all the zips from this page or all the CSVs from a different page. Okay, a little bit more generic. So that's just going to give us all of the lines, those A tag lines. We're just going to get an A tag, a href, and then a link to one of those CSVs. Okay. It's going to put it, the first match is going to go into that attribute called first match. But if there's multiple, it'll go into an attribute list called list matches. Okay. We're then going to expose list matches with some curly braces because it is a list, so we need to expose everything. And match, which we're going to use a bit later on. We use a list exploder, which will take each of those features, and as I said before, put them into their own feature. So one HTML page after the list exploder will become 6 or 7 or more features, depending on how many are on that page. Okay. So we'll have 6 features come through. We need to remove the A tag and the href and quotes. So we're just left with a URL. So we're going to use a substring extractor. We're going to remove the first 8 characters all the way to the end, which is -1. And we know it's going to be 8 because it's always going to be a start tag, A space, href equals. It's always going to be that in this case. So 8 to -1. That'll leave us with our URL in quotes. So we'll just do a very quick string replace, find me quotes, and replace it with nothing. Okay, so we've just got a URL. But then there's a use case of in the home page. So I'll quickly show you this. So this is the home page for our example. And we've got all of these download links that usually you'd have to click on. If I inspect one of those links, I can see the href is actually a relative path. If I hover over it, Google Chrome will be smart enough to say that's the domain name that you're going to go to. But FME doesn't know that. It's only taking the raw text. So we've only got / edubase / and the CSV. So we need to detect to see if that's happened, and then insert the domain name before it, so FME actually goes to the correct place and pulls it down. Okay, so I'll close that and close the page. Back to our FME workspace. So we're going to do a tester. This could be more complicated. You could test for HTTP, HTTPS, but I've used a very simple. If it doesn't contain a www, then you're going to fail this test. We're going to, rather, if it doesn't have www at the start or within it, then you're going to pass this test because I've negated it. So I'm going to go past branch. I'm going to search for a HTTP. So I'll take the target URL, which is the home page again, and I'm going to pull out this bit of regex. We'll take the first instance of a / first instance of that / that doesn't have a / after it or a / before it. Okay, so it means it's going to get rid of that HTTP : //. It won't recognize that. It will go to the next /. So if we put in our test string, HTTP / www.google, it's not matched anything. As soon as I put that first / in, it reads that. Okay, 2 slashes, it ignores. So it'll take all of that link, miss out anything else. Okay. So we'll pull that out and we'll put it into an attribute called domain name. Then we'll have a second tester just to check if there's a / in our edubase, our shortened link. If it does start with a /, we're going to remove it because the domain name will finish with a /, so we can't have the second bit start with a /. Otherwise, there's going to be 2 / in the middle of that URL link, and it won't go anywhere because that double / in the middle will mess it up. Okay, so we're just going to do a really quick substring extractor to take off that first /. But if there isn't, then carry on. String concatenator, just very quickly add the domain name to the source, and we'll overwrite our existing attribute. We'll overwrite source. And then this section is this test is optional. I've put in another publish parameter to say if you want certain named URLs. So in this one, I've just said if the source contains a certain name, which you can set. So if I just wanted edubase, it'll only give me URL links that have the word edubase in the title. Okay, but if you don't select anything, if the publish parameter is empty, then you pass anyway, and it'll just bring back everything. Okay. So into our feature reader, I've set it up to read CSVs, and the dataset is source. Okay. It will have a little bit of a fit because you're selecting a source that doesn't exist, a dataset that doesn't exist. So it will want to read in a file so that it can generate you a port, a specific port to go out of. But because that source is going to keep changing, and because it's coming from the internet, there is no schema to read in. But you can click cancel and it can set up its file. And the feature reader is split up between a schema and generic. If it's generic, the features that come through have all of the information, there's just no schema attached to it. So there's no attributes exposed. So all of our features will come through generic. The schema will have one single feature, and it will have the full schema, what actually makes up that CSV, as an attribute list. So we can take those 2 sets, pull them straight into our dynamic writer. So I've set up a CSV writer. I'm going to call it the FME base name, so that'll be the base name of the features, so that'll be whatever the download links are called. And because it's dynamic, the schema is going to keep changing. So it's going to take the schema from schema features. So in one of the types, it will say whether it's a FME schema feature or not. If it detects a schema feature, it will just add it to a temporary list. And then it will find which schema it should use by the FME feature type of that generic feature. Okay? So when we run this, it will go off to the internet, take the page, just get the href quotes, links, put the domain name back in. So when the feature reader gets it, we're going to get 6 CSVs read in, and the schema will be passed back together, and they'll be called the same thing, and we'll end up with, here we go, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 CSVs, and these were all of the CSVs that were on that site yesterday. Okay, all passed together, all downloaded, and ready to use somewhere else. Okay, I didn't have to go to the site and download each one. FME did it for me. Okay, so you could do this way and just download it, and then another process picks it up, or you don't have to write out here. You can continue and use that data in line within this workspace. Okay, so a very quick review. Benefits: we get to automate that download. Again, we don't have to go to that website and click every single link. We can automate that translation straight away. So same as an API, except we're getting a file that we don't actually have on our systems, taking a file from somewhere else and using it straight away. Okay, so you're able to access it very quickly. There's no real manual input. You can set it up with a batch file so that those published parameters are being set either every time in that parameter file or as a one-off use. We can repeatable, so we again use zip files or CSVs or anything. Okay. So just before we move on, if there are any more questions that you want to ask, do comment below in the lounge. If they're small questions, I'll try and answer them live straight away. If they're bigger questions, I'll wait to the end to give you a much more in-depth explanation or help with your problem or issue, or to make something a bit more, give it a bit more information. If we don't, if you have a question, do comment below. If we don't, we're going to move on to the VAR review. So Safe Software have a VAR review, which is their value-added resellers that come together every year at the VAR conference last week, where we discuss case studies, interesting things that each reseller has done across the world, and talk about where FME is, so the new things in 2016, or where FME is going, so the planned new features within FME, okay, or server and so on. So very quickly, I know a few of you have probably watched Safe Zone webinars about what's in 2016. These are some cliff notes of things that were mentioned and things that were discussed at that event. Okay, so 64-bit FME used to be actually capped at 12 gig. So you could have a really large machine, 64 gig of memory. 64-bit was actually still capped at 12. But in 2016, that's been removed. It'll now use 3 times the system memory. So it'll use more memory than you have available. So it'll move into virtual memory and switch memory. But it also can be redlined. So you can set that cap yourself. So if you have 64-bit, and they've got 64 gig of memory, you could still say FME can use only half of that, 32, and no more. When FME 64-bit 2016 gets to that limit, it'll start moving and realigning itself. There's a move away from TCL code. A lot of transformers were being made or being processed in TCL, but they're being remade into C++ or Python libraries. So the majority of transformers are already in one of those two formats, but they're moving the last few over to be more clear or just be faster, as there are some libraries in C++ and Python that are specially designed, specially optimized for speed in terms of mathematics or analytics. So they're moving more in that direction. The attribute validator is a new transformer which you can use to inspect your attributes and run a certain amount of tests on them. So whether a number is actually a number, whether a string does contain certain characters and things along those lines. It was first suggested back in 2008, and they finally got around to introducing it into 2016. But hopefully that will have more development on top of it to make it much better and much more information in. All the attribute transformers are being merged together into an attribute attribute manager, which you might have seen if you've got 2016 already. Basically, all the attribute creators, exposers, renamers, keepers, all of those are now condensed together into one attribute manager. So you can do all of those things in one place. You don't have to have separate instances of an attribute manager. All the old ones are still present, because if you want to use just a keeper, it will still be there. You can also reference attributes that you've already created. So I'll quickly show you this. Pull in attribute manager. There we go. And I'll add it to float. So we can see all of the attributes that I did have. If I added an attribute test and a value of 123, 123, 123, before I'd have to create another attribute creator so I could reference that value for test. But I can create another one, call it ASDF, and that value, test, is there. I can reference the same attribute that I've just created above it. Okay, that's just a little bit of added features. There were discussions on setting data types. So if you did create a new attribute and you wanted it to be set to a decimal or a float or something specific, when putting to a database, sometimes the database wouldn't recognize the FME data type and put it as some sort of default. So 9 times out of 10, you would set it to one data type. FME will get confused and just set it as a varchar with a default length. There were discussions on that. Safe know that that's a feature wanted both by users and VARs. So they do know about it, they do want it, they do know the need for it, but the developers are saying that setting the data type is very much right in the core of FME, and it might take some time to make it much more available to all the transformers to be manipulated. So that might be a way off. Some other things, database connections and SQL statements are much more refined. So it will also generate the correct syntax for databases. So there was always slight differences between MySQL and Postgres and Oracle. Those are now auto-generated to be correct. So it will change it depending on what database you selected. There's a much better interface, some extra options. There's also in the SQL creator, in an SQL creator, you can connect to one of my local databases, Postgres. If I'm generating a SQL statement, I can go into database tables and there's a tree view. I can go to these database tables and see what makes up license areas, what columns there are. There's a lot of SQL functions. When I'm pulling in a reader, there's a tree view. So just a few versions ago, at least for Postgres, it didn't know where all the other schemas were. You could only ever see public. But now in the table list, it's a tree view. You can see public. You can see any other schemas that I should have in here. You can open those up and see all those tables and actually select which ones you want. So it makes using databases a little bit easier. Esri geodatabase is much more refined. You can have additional options when you create a geodatabase. When you read one in, you can select what version that geodatabase is in. Do I want the first version, the second version, the third? You can then archive to different versions. You have to write to the latest. And even better, you can go to different variances. So you can say, FME, read me or give me the features that are different between version 1 and version 2, and pull those into your database or into your FME workspace. Okay. There's now NoSQL database support. So that I mean MongoDB and other NoSQL databases. So that just work on XML or JSON more specifically. Okay. So there's readers and writers for those. FME server is becoming revamped. The license system is moving. They're generally moving away from floating licenses and moving away from Flex License Manager. So in the brand new FME server, you connect to Safe directly and get your license directly from them. If your FME server is closed or if it's off network, then you can also generate a script which you fill out and email to Safe. They will then give you a method to register or license your FME server. Okay, so it's moving away from Flex. The desktop floating licenses might go in this direction as well in the future, where you've just got a single serial key that's not dependent on a MAC address or an IP address of your machine. You just insert it into FME server or in the future maybe into desktop, and then it works. Okay, so it's much better for maybe VMs or multiple workstations. So you don't have a floating license server, you just take that serial key around. There's also a Docker version for FME server, a special version of FME server, which is just a bit better at resource management. If you're setting up your VM that is using Docker, you can have separate cores as separate building blocks. So the core manages those engines much more efficiently and manages its communication a bit better. It makes it much easier to add more engines as and when you need it. As a look to the future, to 2015, a few features that say they're coming in or they're almost finished or they're still working on concurrent writers. So before, if you had, say for instance, a shape writer, a tab writer, and a database writer all in the same workspace, if you're sending features through, it would write out straight away the very first writer. So say shapefiles is at the top of the list. But if at any point a feature came to the other writers, the tab or the database, it would be held in memory. So your memory usage would just skyrocket until the whole workspace is done, and then it would start writing out those other writers. But in the future, it should be able to write out 10 features to the shape, 10 features to tab, 10 features to database, and 10 features back to a shape again, with no memory holding at all. Ordered creators, so they're moving away from static reader and writer. You can now have expanded the creator family. So you can have, so the feature reader means you can read mid-workflow, the feature writer, write again, right in the middle of the workspace. You can write out to a file and then carry on and keep doing things. It doesn't have to be at the end anymore. So that means if they're moving in that direction, they need to be able to set off creators at certain times or in a certain order. So what they've got at the moment is if you rename a creator 1.creator and then 2.creator, it will read in that order. First creator first, the second creator second, and so on. Okay, so it's starting to bring a bit more order for that direction they want to go. It also works globally. So if a custom transformer has a creator in it that's called number one, a creator, that custom transformer could kick off your workspace. Connecting to web services directly. So they're now moving into different areas where they're not just dealing with static files. You could also start with a web service, pulling information straight down and working with that. Okay? Using an interesting format, AVF, which is an Apple venue format, where it's an internal view of buildings and special interesting locations, being able to pull that format in and actually use it and manipulate it. It's also connecting to Tableau. That's probably coming out in 2016.1, which releases in probably a month's time, if that. So connecting to Tableau, be able to read and then write out to Tableau. And another interesting transformer, HTML report generator, which will take in polygons and generate you a HTML page. You can structure that page. You can say, I want titles, I want graphs, I want leaflet maps. So you could pull in an Excel spreadsheet and generate several different types of graphs, pie charts, bar charts, line charts, anything. And you could also pull in a polygon layer, different postcode areas, for instance, and overlay those onto a leaflet map, which means you could have a HTML page that has a leaflet map with your polygon layer on it. And it's a fully interactive map. You can zoom in, zoom out, and interact with those features. It's quite interesting, quite exciting to look forward to, because all of those extra libraries, because it's an HTML page, just go out to the internet and pull back the leaflet library. It goes out and pulls back Bootstrap, so it's all mobile compliant. You can very quickly generate a HTML page with analytical data on it, or open layer leaflet maps on it, and it means you don't have to have Adobe, doesn't mean you don't have to have Excel, it's just all available in the page. So that's a really good transformer that we're looking forward to. So thank you for listening to that webinar. If there are any questions, again, do post below and I'll get back to them and I'll talk about them, give you a bit more clarity. Thank you for watching this webinar series. If you do want to go back to any webinars, feel free to do so and ask any questions that you want. Hopefully we'll be able to do more webinars either for FME or otherwise on the lounge. So stick around, talk about either FME or other things that we're doing to get the community started. So hopefully those will come through and we'll talk about it next time, and I'll see you next time.